Okay, nearly straight away. So I will say at this stage a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, when we're offering a virtual presentation evening like this, question and answers are usually part of that. Now, I appreciate you may have lots of questions after we've finished this presentation, but I would like you to know, and anybody that's looking at this video recording afterwards that we're going to put on our website, please email or contact us at school at any point for any questions that you might have, and myself or Mr. Littlewood or Mr. Crookwin will get back to you. So those questions that you may have, please ping them in after we finish this information. So here we go. So here are the main things. So we're just going to go over these bits. So I'm going to give you the overview and the process that are involved with the SATS tests, and then how that is reported to you as parents or carers, and any additional support or additional things that we put in place to support everything that's going to happen this year. And then the meaty bits, the important bit, will come from Mr. Crookwin and Mr. Littlewood as soon as I'm finished. So I'll try and be quick to get to the main bit. So first of all, pupils in the current year 6 will be the first group that will actually are intended to sit their SATs in May. So for that reason, it feels like we're getting back to normal, but of course there is that caveat sitting over it that we do have to see things how things play out with the pandemic. But at the moment, the intentions are from the government that we will do that. Now, the SATs, as Mr. Jeffries was mentioning, is that they are an indicator of how well a pupil is doing at the end of Key Stage 2. So for us as a middle school, that's halfway. So it's the halfway in the journey that they have with us. So it is, as Mr. Jeffries said, it's a part of the journey. But we do like to do well, and we like the children to do well. So we do whatever we can to help them get to that point. Now, the main purpose of the results of a SATS test will be because it's the last nationally benchmarked assessment prior to them taking the GCSE. So the one after this will be the GCSE results. Now, for that reason, it is an important reference point for education going forward. And that's really why it's important that we try hard at them. So hopefully you can see the details here. Again, I say that obviously we'll share all of this information via our website as well, so you don't need to make notes. But really what it breaks down to are these. Over the week commencing the 9th of May is when the SATS test will take place. So on the Monday, it's spelling, grammar and punctuation, fairly short tests. They happen on the Monday. On the Tuesday, we have the reading tests. Again, there'll be a bit more information on this from Mr. Crookwin. And the maths paper on the Wednesday, which is the arithmetic. And on Wednesday, also the first of the 2 reasoning papers. And then on the Thursday, the third and final paper, which is on reasoning. So that's how it breaks down. Now, at this point, I am going to tell you that our intention is, as we always have done in the past, is that to make sure that this is not a scary process or a very formal process, and that the children are very confident and motivated, we do run a practice SATS process, usually in early March. And I'm mentioning that to you now is because every year we need to ask for volunteers who may like to come in and help us with this, because we don't have enough volunteers in all of the rooms to make sure that we're offering the best support for all of the children. So we will probably send a letter out nearer the time asking if you may be someone who would like to come in and volunteer. The only thing you have to be aware of, though, is that obviously if your child is taking the SATS tests, we're probably not going to put you in the same room for obvious reasons. But other than that, anybody that would be willing to help, we'd be really good to hear from you. Okay. So just moving on. Okay, so how does it work? First of all, each pupil will have a raw test score, and the way it works is that they use a conversion table to convert that into something called a scale score. Yeah, now, I suppose the main piece of information here is that the scale score of 100 is considered age-related expectation, or in school we just call it ARE. And if it's a score of 110, we can say that it's greater depth. And that gives us an idea. So everybody that takes the test in the country are working around that graded score. And that means that we feel that they're well placed to go on to the next stage. And of course, if it's not quite 100, well, that's really important for us to know as well. And we can take that information and work with that further into year 7. Thanks for film. Okay, here we go. So the paper, so an important piece of information is that the paper that's sat on each day, there isn't a separate or a second type of paper for children that may be looking at higher attaining or anything like that. So each paper is designed where children of all capabilities, all confidences can do the best that they can. So it's in one paper. Okay, so just to give you a bit of an idea, the bigger picture things that are happening in school to support all of this. So first of all, Mr. Jeffries has stolen my thunder a bit here, so I won't repeat what he said. But yes, we do have additional teaching groups this year in year 6 to make those class sizes as small as possible. The teaching groups are flexible, so they work proactively to look for the gaps in learning that are inevitably there, actually, because of the disrupted education that we've had over the last couple of years. And we can work to put children with the right teachers, with the right specialist knowledge, and we can plug those gaps in a really proactive way. To support that, every week, almost every day, we have timetabled daily interventions to which children are invited to get that additional help with certain things that they may be struggling with, to get them up to speed so that they feel confident with that. So we're doing that almost on a daily basis already. We will do light touch, low stakes assessments quite regularly. And from that information, we're able to then, that informs our interventions as they're going on each week. So we're doing that a lot. We will be providing lots of information to support the process in the run up to the SATs. So homeworks will be dedicated to preparation and revision towards those SATs to make sure that the children are as confident as they can be. Revision sessions will be offered as well as practice sessions, and that will be included in the interventions. And of course, we have Google Classroom now, which will help us deliver lots and lots of content that can be personalized for individual classes or individual pupils. Look out for additional opportunities that will come during the year. For example, we will provide, should parents want to receive it, we will provide helpful content that can be looked at over Easter. That, of course, that's parental choice, but we put out that. We'll also run additional booster sessions or Easter workshops if we feel that that would benefit the children. As I said earlier, early March, we'll be running a SATS experience. So it will not be an unfamiliar or scary process by the time May comes around. Okay. And now for the main bits. I've said enough. So I'm now going to jump out of my seat and hand over to Mr. Crookwin, Head of English.
Hello, almost flawless there. So I'm Mr. Crookwin, the Head of English at Selwood. Very nice to virtually meet you all. Again, very strange doing this, not being able to talk to real people or live people, but I'm here to talk to you about English and how that will work with the SATs. So the first thing I thought I'd like to talk about is what the curriculum actually looks like for English. And again, building on what Mr. Jeffrey said earlier, one of the things that is really important to us is that it's not just a sort of SATS factory. We have a very broad curriculum that deals with sort of real world issues and reflects what's going on in the world and builds on sort of students' interests. So I thought it'd be quite an interesting place to start, just to show you what the curriculum covers, some of the texts we cover, some of the areas we cover at the beginning. But obviously we are here to talk about the SATs, so I will move on to talking about those. There are 4 elements to what is assessed and tested in English for the SATs. That is grammar and punctuation, spelling, reading and writing. I'm going to talk a little bit about those in detail and sort of take you through those in detail individually as we go through. So the assessments at the end of Key Stage 2, we have reading, which is tested under exam conditions, as is spelling, as Mr. Broad said earlier, that will be in May. Punctuation grammar is also tested under exam conditions, and they have 3 separate tests, one for reading, one for spelling, and one for punctuation and grammar. They are also tested on their writing, but this will not be done under examination conditions. This is actually done in class, and the writing skills will be teacher assessed. The writing will reflect a variety of different writing styles and also a variety of different writing skills as well. To help prepare students for this, we at Selwood ensure that all our units of work directly address the skills that students will require for SATS and beyond. As Mr. Jeffrey said, SATS are not the be all and end all, so it's not just preparing them for SATS, it's actually preparing them for GCSEs, but also for life after school as well. End of unit assessment tests are completed by complemented by additional SATS practice tests throughout the year. So there will be SATS tests, sort of smaller light touch tests, SATS tests taking place throughout the year. What these do is allow us to precisely identify which skills need to be explicitly targeted by students. That allows us, as well as in class teaching, to run the additional intervention for students where required. The way intervention will work in English is those tests will flag up for us where students might need a little extra help with certain skills. They will then have a sort of fortnightly intervention program which will run for 2 weeks, where those students will have additional support meeting those skills. Once they've met those skills at the end of those 2 weeks, they then go back into their regular lessons. Other students will then be taken out to help with the intervention with their skills as well. Hopefully that will make sense. So in terms of reading at Key Stage 2, reading is not just made up of one thing. Reading is a collection of different skills which help contribute to our understanding of text and the world around us. So the reading skills, it's not just a case of reading and comprehension. It actually tests a variety of things, from being able to skim and scan text to locate key information. There is comprehension in there as well, ensuring that we understand the text's meaning. Inference and deduction to work out sort of the implied meaning behind a text, perhaps where a writer has kind of hidden what they're actually saying behind a text as well. Throughout Key Stage 2, the children will move from decoding words to interpretation and deduction. So someone has just pinged up a message about timings for the English tests. So the reading test is an hour, the grammar test is 45 minutes, and the spelling test is 20 minutes. When we do smaller versions of those tests in class, we run to those timings as well, so they get used to that sort of timing system. Hopefully that answers your question. So to help students, in school, your child will learn to read new words independently. I'll talk a little bit about homeworks in a second. Some of you will have seen the Tier 2 vocabulary homework, which should help familiarise students with a wider range of vocabulary. We work to helping them to understand themes, plots and ideas. Currently, all year groups are doing some work on story structures and the shape of stories. Recognise the use of figurative language, which are techniques like simile and metaphor, where a writer has a sort of hidden meaning behind a language technique. Identifying language structures used to organise the text. Compare different writing styles, finding information in fiction and non-fiction, and again, inferring and deducing, so reading between the lines to work out what a writer really means. So the reading paper itself will be made up of 3 different extracts, and we won't know until the SATs take place what those extracts are. They could be a range of things from fiction story extracts, poetry, non-fiction writing, down to things like tables, charts, adverts, maps, newspaper extracts, extracts from textbooks. It really does cover a wide range of different text types. You can see here, for example, this is one of the example reading booklets with a non-fiction piece on the dodo and sort of history of the dodo. They then get questions broken up across those 3 different texts. You can see a sort of range of questions here. Some of them are multiple choice, some of them require a simple sort of comment, some of them will require students to find quotations in the text, and that helps us. The variety of questions helps us to identify the reading skills that students need. So to support the students' reading, we use at Selwood a reading strategy called reciprocal reading. It helps students understand the process of reading and how it works. It also helps them to break down and tackle more challenging texts, because the key for us is we want our students to be accomplished readers and we want them to be challenging themselves. There's obviously a difference between reading for pleasure. A lot of our students like things like Diary of a Wimpy Kid for reading for pleasure, but actually those types of texts don't always challenge their reading understanding. So we also look at reading for purpose. This is used in combination with something called the Accelerated Reader Programme. This is run through the library and through English lessons, and students will throughout the year take accelerated reader tests. This gives them a rough reading age, but also gives them what's called a zone of proximal development. which means that we get given a score for them that shows the types of books they should be reading that will help develop and stretch them even further and help boost their reading age. This was done through the library. Students are made aware of this, and you can actually access the Accelerated Reader Programme from home. There is a link to it on the school website. Your child should know how to access it, but feel free to email if they're not certain. We also, throughout the year, teach reading skills explicitly. So we're doing some work this week, for example, on inference and deduction in years 5 and 6, and years 7 and 8 are looking at developing that inference and deduction and sort of supporting it with analysing writers' techniques. In regards to the reciprocal reading, I thought it would be worthwhile telling you guys about it. So this sort of structure will be made available on the school website at some point as well to show you sort of how it works. But basically, there are 5 steps to the way we read something. Before we even start reading, we do what's called activating prior knowledge. If we've been reading a novel, for example, when you pick it back up, you're going to have to remember what's come before it at that point. If you're reading an article about something, let's say you're reading an article about COVID, you might use your sort of access prior knowledge to work out what do you already know about COVID, what do you already know about this topic. Or knowledge of a particular subject. And that's really important because it helps us to do step 2, which is to predict. Before we start reading something, we quite often predict what is going to happen and why. You know, what do we already know about this topic? What are we likely to expect this article to be about, or how are we expecting it to be written? Step 3 of that is then reading and clarification. You read the actual article or the text itself, and you'll go through and you might encounter something you're not familiar with, a word you don't understand or a concept you're not familiar with. So we teach the students how to tackle that. How do you overcome not understanding what a word or concept means? How can you find out more about them? The next step is a sort of reflective step. So we get them to think about, why is the text written that way, or why is it that why is it that the writer's written in a particular way? Is there a bias in this article that I'm reading? So we get them to actually be reflective and question what they've read, thinking about writers' techniques or thinking about the purpose behind it. And then finally, the final step is to summarize it to help their sort of memory, what's happened in it, what did they understand about it, and why might that be significant. So this will be put up on the school website along with some examples of how it can be used alongside reading. Obviously, the bit that you guys are very interested in is how to support your child reading at home. So one of the things that's really important, I know Mr. Jeffries talked about it earlier, is reading regularly. And students should be encouraged to read a wide range of texts at home. So not just fiction texts, non-fiction as well, so reputable newspapers, magazine articles. One of the things we're developing at the moment is a suggested reading list, not just of sort of fiction, but non-fiction as well, useful articles that we will make available to you on the school website. As Mr. Jeffrey said, he did steal my thunder as well slightly, talking to your child about what they are reading, encouraging them to use a reciprocal reading strategy, talking to them about what they've understood about what they've read as well, and encouraging students to think about what we call PAF, purpose, audience and format of what they're reading. Purpose, why has it been written? What is it there to do? Is it there to entertain, to inform? Is it there to sort of argue a particular point? Who is the audience for it? Is it aimed at people of their age? Is it aimed at a specific group? How might that affect the sort of language that is used? And then the format itself. You know, if it's a newspaper article, does it follow the conventions of a newspaper article? If it's a letter, does it follow the conventions of letter writing? And again, we will put some more guidance. We're putting together some guidance for this, which will go on the school website as well. We would also recommend these as additional resources you can get at home. We are looking into sort of, we'll probably receive a letter later this year about how you can purchase these through the school, how you can get a copy of these through the school. But I would recommend the CGP guides are very useful if you want to provide additional support from home as well. So that's reading. So I've thrown a lot of information at you there. So the writing side of things, obviously writing as a life skill is central for students' ability to communicate with the outside world. It's something that we use every day, from sort of texts, emails, more formal letters, job applications, things like that. So it's a life skill, and we want to sort of impress that on the students. So at Key Stage 2, our students can expect to write in a variety of different styles and for a variety of different purposes. It's not all just about writing a story or writing a poem. They will look at different styles of writing and the skills that accompany those different styles of writing. We also do quite a lot at looking at the difference between formal and informal types of writing as well. So the key skills for this, one of the things we sort of really drill down on: accurate use of paragraphs, developing a wider range of punctuation, effective use of connectives or adverbials, sentences with clauses and phrases, how to use adverbs correctly, possessive apostrophes, direct and reported speech, and the active and passive voice as well, because these are all things that are both on the sort of Key Stage 2 curriculum, but also skills they will need throughout their life. Some examples of the assessments we cover are on the board: writing a letter from the perspective of a character to another. So we do quite a lot of writing in role as a particular character, creating an autobiographical piece of writing. So how can you take information about yourself, present that information, but do it in a way that is sort of both challenging and interesting for a reader. News reports on the events of a story, report writing about a particular character, and analysis of characters as well. So there's a wide range of assessments beyond those as well, but those are just to give you a flavour of some of the assessments we cover at Selwood. So how we support students writing, we introduce students to a range of different text types and writing styles. It's not just about looking at novels. We look at a wide variety of texts in reading, because obviously reading and writing are linked. We use explicit modelling of examples, so we will talk through with students how we structure something, how we might tackle it, to sort of encourage them to sort of recognise their own learning. We have the Tier 2 vocabulary homework, which hopefully you are all familiar with, where we're trying to expand students' vocabulary. So Tier 2 vocabulary are words that are used less frequently, but will help stretch and challenge them and develop their vocabulary and their communication skills. And we ensure that tasks are relevant and that skills are revisited and be built on frequently. Grammar, that leads me nicely into grammar, which obviously goes hand in hand with students' ability to write and communicate. Grammar rules are taught not separately to everything else, but they're actually taught throughout the curriculum, and they're embedded into units of work, because actually I think it's really important that students recognise that grammar goes hand in hand with reading and writing. It's not a separate skill in and of itself. So the punctuation and grammar paper, there is an example of it on the board for you at the moment. They might be asked to look at which sentence uses a colon correctly. They might be asked to think about tense use, so past progressive and present progressive. They might look at things like the active and passive voice. And again, these will vary from multiple choice questions, fill in the blanks, to write a sentence using this tense. The spelling paper goes alongside the grammar and punctuation one. They will be given 20 words, a minute per word. They will read a sentence twice that contains that word, and they have to spell that word correctly. So to help students with that, we every other week, years 5 and 6 are getting spelling homeworks, which teach them a particular rule for spelling or a particular focus. There are some of the examples of the spellings that have come up on past papers on the board as well. On the screen, sorry, I keep saying on the board. It's been 5 lessons of teaching today. And that brings me nicely to numeracy. Before I hand over to Mr. Littlewood, I will just say there will be more content made available on the school website in the coming weeks, as well as additional resources that we can provide you with to help support your child at home. I'll now hand over to Mr. Littlewood.
Another seamless change. Hello again to everybody. Obviously can't hear you, see you, but as I said, be able to tell you a little bit about maths and numeracy and how the SATS going to work in that area as well. So first of all, okay, as Mr. Boards talked about earlier, they've changed from how they used to be, basically, and how a few years ago they decided to break it into, rather they used to do 2 papers, and that was a mixture of arithmetic and a mixture of reasoning, and now it's very much a case of splitting that into 3 components. One being the arithmetic test, which is 30 minutes long, it's 36 questions with maximum 40 marks available, and they cover the calculations for all the operations, so your addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. And the use of fractions, percentages and decimals. And over the course of the paper, from question 1 up to question 36, it gets more and more challenging. And so you can see, for example, here, you can see taken from past examples. You can see it starts off with simple things such as taking away 10 or adding 2 3-digit numbers together. And it progresses on to do things where you get missing box problems. So again, still using those, you can see still using those skills of addition and subtraction. So adding two numbers where there's different numbers of the place value is different numbers of digits. And then you can build on to things like cubing numbers, dividing decimals and timesing numbers by 10, 100 and 1,000. So these are things that we really repeat when we're in school. So we go over and over and over them in the build-up and repeat things, as Mr. Crookwing showed you with the development plan for English. It's the same for maths in terms of building on those skills. They're skills that they've been looking at in year 5, and then they're continuing to look at them again in year 6, but obviously in a lot greater depth to push them and challenge them to have that greater understanding. So then you can take as the example of some of the very late questions. So you can see actually quite tricky things like 2 1/4 times 34 or 3,472 divided by 62. And I know some parents might be a bit scared, a bit shocked by that themselves, because we often get I often get messages from parents saying that they're not the most confident with their methods and their maths is not an area that they're strong in. But again, that's why we're here. It's just reminding you that, you know, if you do want support from in maths, that you can come to us and we'll provide that for you. And again, we often have parents questioning about methods and how we deliver the content base, because it might be different to how you learned when you were at school. And again, we're more than happy to run through those things with you. And again, we will be hoping to hold workshops and things. Yes, I can clarify, it's 36 questions in 30 minutes. So again, it's talking about time management, really. You've seen the earlier questions. For example, they won't take a minute. There are questions in there that we're hoping the children will rattle through. Whereas you can see that those last couple of questions there are particularly difficult and will take a significantly longer period of time for them to complete. But by the time May comes around, hopefully they'll be in a position where they feel confident and know how to do that fairly quickly as well. So, as Mr. Jeffries said, he seems to be stealing all our thunder today. The arithmetic, we do have a big focus on the arithmetic because it is seen as easier, because they're not required to read. It's literally just, as you've seen, it's the calculations that they're required to answer. It's just like that. Whereas the reasoning papers are the worded problems, and where lots of our children come unstuck. And so that's why Mr. Crookwing and Mr. Jeffries both suggested about the reading being really important and developing reading, because that will aid their mathematical understanding if they're able to pick apart the questions and understand what they have to do when it comes to those reasoning papers. There are fantastic resources online for arithmetic in particular and practice, and I've labelled this one. I've got some resources a bit later in the presentation as well. For example, it's called myminimaths.co.uk, and it actually breaks down the year group, every year group for year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6, and all the skills that they need to learn. And it has all the arithmetic questions from past years. It has 16 examples of all the questions, because the arithmetic paper is always in the same order, the same skills. That last question will always be long division, for example, and it breaks it down into all those different skills that you can pick apart and use those. And we actually will be using some of those resources for our interventions. But again, it's something, if you wanted to use at home, it's definitely something I would recommend to have a look at in terms of being free and able to use it as a resource. So paper 2 and 3, as we said, the problem solving and reasoning. So these are slightly longer, as you can see, 40 minutes in length. So pupils will require calculation skills, but will need to answer questions in context and decide what is required for a solution. They don't get a calculator. It's very much about them using their understanding to be able to answer the problems. So again, as I said before, they're actually 35 marks each. So it ends up being a total of 110. So we've got 40 and then 35 and 35. So make sure my maths is right there. So you can see here's an example. So it's talking about place value, writing the numbers closest to 500 and write the number furthest from 500. And building on, so you can see that's the very beginning of the paper. So again, things that would hopefully take the children a matter of seconds to work through. Then topics such as population and the total number of people, so recognising that that's an addition question and them having to calculate that, and they've got the space there to calculate and put their answers. And then the difference between the numbers of people, so again, subtraction. And then it does build onto things such as reflection and using a mirror line and copying that shape. So they would be given a mirror in which to be able to help them do that. And then you can see here, you can build in some really quite complex problems, multi-step problems where there's more than one calculation required. So again, this is something that we practice in school regularly in terms of them understanding what they have to do. So you can see it says the total cost to make 20 jars. They have to read around the question, hence why some of our children find this a lot more difficult than the arithmetic paper, because they have to understand what numbers they need to use and how to apply that knowledge to be able to answer the question fully. So reading really, really important. And then you can see another example here. So using negative numbers and the difference between positive and negative values. And again, the second question there. And then also time. Time is one of those concepts we talk to children a lot about. Lots of our children don't actually wear watches, and it's something that actually we take for granted that actually lots of children know how to tell the time, and actually they don't, because often we dictate to them, we tell them when things are happening, whereas parents, we tell them when things are happening, when they don't have that need for themselves to know what times are. And you can see that it's actually looking at digital clocks and analog clocks, 24-hour and 12-hour as well. And actually time is a really strange concept when you dig down into it, knowing that there's 60 minutes in an hour, there's 24 hours in a day, 365 and a quarter days in a year. There's no uniform unit to it. You can't multiply time, you can't divide time. It's very an abstract concept, but it's definitely an area that at home you can discuss with the children and hope to practice with them, because as I said, we hopefully all have that universal understanding of how it works. As I said, it's something definitely to work on at home and share with them. Here's another example. So in terms of a shape question and being able to calculate the values of what it looks like, and how much each shape is worth. And then there's reading timetables, again, something that's practical and useful in hopefully in their later lives, and able to pick out information for them. And then it does still, you can see here, so it links the arithmetic in but it's about the explanation of the problem. So we're talking about how the answer above can be used to solve the answer below, and it's not a case of just saying because I know it is this. You have, and giving the answer, it's explaining how you got there, and we go through that lots with children about that explain, that reasoning and that explanation of their tasks. We often use the tasks in school called prove it's, where we get children to prove their understanding of a certain concept and how that works. And so it's getting them to really explain it rather than just going because I know it is, or because it is. They have to explain their understanding behind it. So the types of skill we build and assess in school are fluency. So as we said, that basic concept, and we also use terms in school such as try it. So that trying the initial phase. So that could be, as I said, that basic, if you're talking about 2 or 3 or 4 digit by 2 digit multiplication, we're showing them the methods, and like the arithmetic paper, we're showing them here's the method and how you do it, and you try using this skill. Then it builds into the reasoning, so it links into the reasoning problems, or use it, we sometimes call them in school as well, where they're using that initial skill that they've learned in the fluency section, but in maybe in a worded problem context. For example, you could say 312 children have 17 sweets each. How many do they have altogether? So recognizing, you put in that information 312 times by 17, they're able to apply that to the question. And then problem solving. Can they solve complex problems to using those skills? So it builds up, it's progressional throughout each skill within maths follows those steps, really, looking at the basics, understanding, building to reasoning, and then building to the problem solving. So, as I said, recalling maths knowledge quickly, applying the knowledge across the calculations for fluency, calculations and mathematical language to prove an argument, and then the problem solving, looking at different contexts and different situations, being able to see it within other contexts, as well as just the one that they've seen on this within that question. So resources to use at home or on the website or on our Google Classrooms. So the White Rose reasoning questions, we upload those because they're what we use, and we often use them when we were in lockdown and using lots of remote learning. We upload these as part of our isolation work and things that's available to us, and that's the work that they kind of complete in school. TT Rockstars, again, Mr. Jeffries talked about that underpinning skills. Their tables are vital, absolutely vital So being able to understand and answer those questions that you've seen earlier, even the fractions and the division, knowing their tables is absolutely so important for them to be able to access all the information within the SATs themselves. They also have got access to, as I said, My Mini Maths there and My Maths as well, where each student has a login and they've got tasks on which they can use. So it's really important, as I said, we are able to, as Mr. Crookwin showed earlier, there are the CGP books, which some parents like to use as well to revisit those topics and see the different topics that we're able to learn, and support how you can support your children at home. As I said, if you do have, if you'd like specific resources around specific topics, or like specific information about a certain topic or how to deliver a topic, then we are available to you. Please email us and we'll try and get back to you and provide you links or provide you resources which you can use. And as I said, we're here to help, really, to support you in that way. I'll pass back to Mr. Broad now, who's just going to seamlessly transition into the seat and go from there for you. Thanks.
Do we have that slide?
Yeah, one more slide, please.
Hello, me again. Okay, I'm going to finish with a really simple idea that I think we all know. And these are the 4 quick wins when it comes to preparing for a test or a week that involves lots of tests. And they are punctuality and attendance. I just have to mention this because it's a slick operation when we have 181 Year 6 children all taking tests. Some of them will be in certain rooms in different areas of the school, but many of them will have specialist equipment with them to satisfy additional needs, etc. So it's actually a very tight ship in terms of the organisation. So being punctual and being keen on the attendance during that week obviously helps a great deal, because otherwise, if children arrive very late to school, they will be asked to wait, and they'll only be able to sit down and do their tests later when the others are finished and the papers have been collected, because it's a test situation. So that's always very helpful. A good night's sleep, a good breakfast, correct equipment. Correct equipment, we will obviously send lots of reminders in the run up to the practice SATs in March, but also in May, about the equipment that should be brought along, including pencils, pencil sharpeners, rubbers, and things like that. We'll make sure that you've got that full list, and we'll put it on our website so you can double check it. All of these things do help with that easy running of it, and it just helps everybody, and especially the children, with their confidence, and they can be relaxed about it. Now, I'm going to, I think that's the last slide. You're probably quite relieved to hear. So I'm going to just stop presenting, if I can do that. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so I'm now going to finish up. So hopefully all of that has been really informative. I just wanted to mention that I have been recording this video. I'm telling you that out of courtesy, of course, because you're here. I hope that that's not a problem for anyone. It will be, I'll edit it first so it has the important information in it. I think it will be absolutely fine, but please send me a message, email the school if you have any concerns about sharing this video for other parents who weren't able to make it. I would like to finish with one question. If you can't remember how to identify a fronted adverbial, or you can't remember your long division and would like a bit of a revision session, what I'm mentioning there are parent-pupil workshops led by our teachers here, which we have run in the past, but we think would be quite a popular thing for people to come along and join. We would run it in an early evening, and we basically share with you the methods that we would like them to use in the test. Now, if that's something that you would be interested in hearing about, could you please put your hand up, your virtual hand? If I have a lot of interest in those sort of things, I would be really keen to see. Oh, wow. I think we have quite a lot of interest. Okay, that's good enough. So look, that's brilliant. So what we'll do is we'll see if we can arrange that, where we can demystify or revise some of those ideas, those methods and those functions and those ideas from reading, writing and maths, and we'll invite you along to have a bit of a session on that. Now, of course, that does depend what happens with COVID. But if we're allowed to, of course, we'll see if we can do that and put that in place. On that note, I'm going to finish there a little bit earlier than planned, which is great. Thank you ever so much for all coming along and joining us. Hopefully the next time we can meet will be face to face. On that note, goodbye from Mr. Littlewood. Bye. And Mr. Crookwin, and of course Mr. Jeffries. Thank you ever so much. No problem. See you. Bye.
Thank you.